Welcome. My name is Sam Post, owner of Phenomenal CBD store in Salisbury, North Carolina. Our guest today is Representative Dr. Amber Baker, a newly elected member of the North Carolina House of Representatives, representing much of the city of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Dr. Baker has a long resume that includes a bachelor's degree from Winston-Salem State, master's and PhD from Ohio State, along with academic stints at Wake Forest and Harvard. She's been a teacher, educational consultant, a leader in the Forsyth County Democratic Party, and for the past 12 years, principal of Kimberly Park Elementary School. I came across Dr. Baker when I was searching normal.org for North Carolina legislators who favored legalization of cannabis. Dr. Baker has an A rating. So I invited her to be here and she graciously accepted. So I do want to hear about that. However, as I started to learn about Dr. Baker, I realized that she's not just a politician who favors legalization of cannabis. I'm a retired teacher myself, and it looks to me like Dr. Baker is a treasure. She's that rare legislator with the background and knowledge and closeness to the public schools to understand how votes in Raleigh impact the children who are children now, but will someday soon be our doctors, bankers, customers, and teachers. It occurs to me that the real advocate for children with firsthand experience in public education in a position of power is a rare thing. Our First Lady is special that way, and so is Dr. Baker. Wow. So with your permission, Dr. Baker, I'd like to start with the cannabis discussion and then also ask you some questions about education in North Carolina. Welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As you were speaking, I was like, who is that person? But absolutely. I never passed the opportunity to talk about education and talk about the hope that I have for the future of our I call them our babies. So it doesn't matter what age. I feel like they're our babies and they're our future. So absolutely. And excited. This is the first time that I actually have an opportunity to talk about kind of why I support the legalization of cannabis and how I just think that it's a win-win if we just take away our personal beliefs and stigmas around it.
Well, welcome. So we've never met before.
Correct.
So all that stuff I just said was from Googling, right?
Yeah.
So I assume was it accurate? Was that?
It is.
Yeah.
My school, Kimberly Park, is the oldest school in the Winston-Salem Forsyth County schools. It will be celebrating its centennial in 3 years. And so it has been in the community continuously for nearly 100 years, with the exception of the year that it burned down. So understanding that it could be a catalyst for change, and definitely a hub for providing not only opportunities for our students, but for our families and stakeholders, I began to just become a champion of all things for a better life for people. So working with our families, getting them good quality housing and helping them to learn skills so that they could achieve good jobs, so that they could begin to work themselves out of poverty. And just an advocate and a champion for the voiceless and oftentimes people who don't have a champion or someone to fight for them. And so education was the venue that the Lord gave me, but it was just so much more than that. And you can't really talk about education in a vacuum, being a great equalizer, if we don't have a pathway out of poverty, of which education is a large part of that.
Mm. Well, I watch politics on TV a lot, mm-hmm. and watch, the hearings and the clips of the hearings and stuff. Mm-hmm. But some of them, some of our representatives have not been, they've been there a while.
Mhm.
You know, and if you've been in a school as a principal, you've been involved in, you've been a sociologist, you know
Yeah.
what's going on with people
Yeah.
on the ground. So that's probably a little, you've got a lot to offer, and then you're a freshman representative, so they might not want to hear it, but I don't know. What's that
Well,
like?
I won't be denied. I think sometimes life experience also should be what centers you. And having experienced personally many of the issues that I fight for others, that stays near and dear to my heart. I just said tonight to one of my colleagues, the difference between me and some of my other families is along the way in life, people always saw that I would be somewhere better than I was at that point in my life, and they continue to give me a hand up. So I've never forgotten that. And so I understand to whom much is given, much is required, and I don't mind speaking up. So um, they've sent me here to speak out and to advocate, and I may not be able to affect change since the Democrats are not in the minority. I mean, in the majority. But it's not going to stop me from reaching across the aisle and saying, you know, have you thought about it this way? Do you realize that these decisions have these kind of impacts? And the Senate Bill 37 is a prime example of that. That as Democrats, we're receiving a lot of criticism for not supporting that. But as always, it's in the messaging. And the governor had already planned to reopen
What can you say what that bill is?
the Senate Bill 37 was the bill put forth um, about reopening schools. And let me say this, it should have been returned to face-to-face instructions because schools have been open continuously since last March when we had to pivot from person-to-person learning or face-to-face learning to online learning. And so the governor had already planned to do that. But what Senate Bill 37 didn't do was to provide options for parents at the secondary level to be able to continue to keep their children home to learn remotely if they were not safe or if they didn't feel like it was safe for their children to return to face-to-face instruction. There were no provisions in there that allowed for the governor, in the event that we had outbreaks or we saw a surge in the numbers going in the wrong direction, that he would be able to close down schools if he needed to. And then it also took away local control from the districts in terms of being able to close down schools if they had outbreaks in schools. So we can't take away um, or even impugn parents who want to exercise the rights that they think is best for their children. And then we can't tie the hands of the people who are closest to the issues. And I've said that there is no educator that you can talk to that doesn't want to return to face-to-face instruction, but they want to do it in a way that is safe. We want to make sure that we have provisions in place because we don't talk about that. And so when Dr. Fauci says that, you know, it's safe for children to return, he also says that, you know, we need to have a good infrastructure, infiltration system in place for the air, the quality of air, and we need to make sure that we have other safeguards in place. So we can't just pick and choose what parts of a safe return to school looks like. We have to look at it in the totality of it all.
Okay, so see if I got this. And I
Yeah.
want to move on to cannabis. But what's going
Okay.
on, it sounds like, is that we've got our governor,
Mm-hmm.
Governor Cooper,
Mm-hmm.
Democrat, and then we've got
Mhm.
this legislature that's all Republican, or not all Republican, but majority.
Majority, yeah.
And they want Senate Bill 37, which means open up schools no matter what. And the
Mhm.
governor wants a little flexibility in case
Mhm.
COVID spikes
Mhm.
to adjust and make adjustments
Mhm.
as the medical community suggests. Is that
Correct.
that's
That's it. Yes.
So that's the fight. It's just a fight, science versus do what we want. Sort of.
Yeah, and I think that we've got to be open to what is in the best interest of our families, and our teachers. We talk a lot about what the children need, and we should. We're in the business of children. But our teachers also have families, they have fears, they have concerns. And so we shouldn't demonize them for being human and still not knowing all of the repercussions from COVID. We don't know. Um, and so we need to show a little compassion and be a little understanding around that. And, when it comes time to fully funding schools and paying teachers their worth, I certainly hope that we see the same energy around ensuring that, as we do around whether or not we're going to allow parents to go into um, a basketball game or a football game or returning students back to school. We need advocates too. And a lot of times teachers are left to hold the bag for a lot of societal issues that don't fall on our backs. It's just not fair. So
Have you gotten your shot?
I have not gotten my shot, and I think it's a very personal decision. I personally am not comfortable with getting the shot, but that's not to say that if you feel like you need to get the shot, then get the shot. I'm not discouraging anyone from that, but for me personally, I just need a little more research, and I need to have clear answers, and we don't always get straight answers, and that concerns me. The lack of transparency around side effects and what went into actually determining the safety of all of this. But my mother, who's 85, has gotten both of her shots. My brother, who is 70, got his shots, and my daughter, who works in healthcare, has gotten her shots. So again, I'm not here to discourage anyone, nor am I to encourage. I think it is people's personal choice. However, if you're not going to get the shot, then you need to make sure that you're doing everything you can to not only stay safe for yourself, but to keep others around you safe. And so that means masking up and keeping your hands clean and keeping a safe distance. And, I choose to continue to do quarantining as best I can, simply because I do not want the shot, and I don't want to spread it, and I don't want to contract it.
I got it. Well, I'm getting my second shot on Friday.
Hmm.
And then 2 weeks after that,
Hmm.
I'm gonna go pick up my new grandson who was 3 months
Oh,
old. And I've only seen him through a glass door once. So we're really looking for, my wife and I both get our second shots on Friday. Anyway,
what we
let's
do for our grandchildren. What we do for our grandchildren.
yeah, I'll tell you, I encourage you to get that shot. It may, I feel a lot freed. I feel freed up since I did.
Yeah.
Like maybe I'm not going to die from this if I get it. Anyway, let's move on from shots.
Okay. All right.
So why is the cannabis issue? Why is that important to you? For them to give you an A rating, you must have said something somewhere along the way or to somebody.
Well, what I've said about cannabis and the legalization of cannabis is, before tobacco was legal, it was illegal. And, we know through prohibition, possessing alcohol was illegal. But now both of those things are commonplace. And the reason for not legalizing it was simply lack of knowledge and understanding. And both of those things have proven to be very detrimental to us as a society and to individuals' health. So my passion around the legalization of cannabis is really twofold. That I think is in the state of North Carolina, because this is where we live, but most certainly in other states as well. When you had industry leave, and in our case being a state that was built on tobacco, and now that we don't have the same market that we have, we have to provide our farmers and families who made a living for their families off of tobacco some reasonable alternatives for pivoting and reinventing themselves. And I think cannabis is a wonderful opportunity for that. Additionally, we know that through research and in the states where we have medicinal cannabis, that it has proven to have a great effect on people's health. And then thirdly, and probably more importantly, being an African-American woman, is the decriminalization piece. And we know that historically, African-American, particularly African-American males, are punished harshly, more harshly, and given stiffer sentences for smaller amounts of marijuana than their white male counterparts who may have larger quantities of cocaine, powder cocaine. And so I think it's a win-win in a sense that you hear the argument all the time that it's the gateway drug to other more illicit use of narcotics. And there is no proof of that. I think your drug of choice is your drug of choice. And so I think we have to debunk that myth. And I think it's all about the money. When we show that we can bring a substantial amount of income into our state, to our respective cities, I think some of your smaller counties that are struggling because there is no industry there and no way of building a stronger tax base, the legalization of cannabis could provide that. And then, again, decriminalizing it. We have bigger issues to deal with than locking up our African-American men over smaller quantities of marijuana. And I know that Attorney General Stein gave a kind of update on a commission that he held, and that came up. And I know that he did not necessarily say that he was in support of legalization of cannabis, but he definitely sees the value in decriminalizing it as a recreational use for recreational use. And so that's why I think it is. And I think sometimes people's personal opinions, we often use religion to really kind of be a catch-all for things that we don't want to deal with. And so sometimes you hear that religious argument, and there again, if we're going to have that argument, then we could have it for alcohol and for tobacco and for the over abuse of sex and the over sexualization of women. I mean, there's a number of things that could fall under that category, but we don't want to talk about that.
When we come back, we'll talk about what our chances are to legalize cannabis in North Carolina.
Want to hear more about your favorite TV shows and movies that are on countless streaming services?
Then listen to Up Next with your new favorite hosts, me, Kristen Aviles.
And me, Christina Walter.
Every other week, we'll highlight one genre, but 2 movies or TV shows, one old and one new.
We'll let you know what's hot and what's not from your favorite
or least favorite
streaming services.
And be sure to stay tuned to the end of each episode where we shout out an artist whose name you should know for their talent in the industry.
So follow us to stay up to date with your favorite hosts from Up Next,
a part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
There was a new poll that came out a few weeks ago, Elon College. Has there been any buzz in Raleigh in the legislature about this lately?
I haven't heard of anything. I've had a couple of people reach out to me to kind of find out my position on it, but not heard of any buzz. I think right now the focus is really on the 2 major things of COVID relief and getting our school system back to face-to-face instruction. So I know that has taken up the bulk of our time as we move forward. And so there has not been a lot of conversation, but I think your question to me was about how can we move this forward? And I think if we can show through the success of other states that have successfully legalized this, that you didn't see an increase in crime, and you don't see more abuse around the use, and if you can show where it has made a great financial impact around the state in terms of generating dollars, I think that you can begin to get some support, because again, it's always about the money.
Mm. Well, I think the money looks pretty good for those states. And Colorado had a surplus. They had to give a rebate. And there was a poll. Elon College just did a poll a few weeks ago that showed North Carolina, the population favors, like 85% favors it for medical and 65 for recreational. So there's the public, but North Carolina doesn't allow referendums unless you guys put it on the ballot. We can't have a petition or anything like that here.
Yeah, but I think that this is one of those things where we have to make sure that the request and the will of the people are made known, particularly to the governing party, the party in power. A lot of times there's pressure put on the Democrats, but we're not in charge. So I think that there has to be pressure. I think if you can get powerful lobbyists and people who hold some power as it pertains to shaping legislation in the place that we call the House and the Senate, then we can begin to get some traction. But you can't just have these pockets of advocacy and support, because it won't materialize in changing anything in terms of legalizing cannabis.
Well, I'm going to register my preference and then move to and ask you something about education. But
Sure.
I'm hoping that when it is legal, because it will be, it's 36 states now, or 34, 36 have legal cannabis. So eventually that'll happen, because we'll be losing money. People will be driving to another state. But I'm hoping that we have that we let stores like mine sell it, become dispensaries, and not turn the ABC stores into the only dispensaries. And put me out of business.
Right.
But that's a debate y'all will probably have one of these days.
Well, I think that a lot of times when you're dealing with Republicans in terms of their ideological beliefs around business, they're all for free industry, right? And they support a capitalistic society. So how can how can you support free industry and capitalism, but yet you continue to want to hinder those that want to exercise their rights to own businesses that will be dispensaries? So I think that's the argument that you make, and not from a point of hypocrisy, which would definitely be apropos for the situation, but you make it from, you try to speak to what their core beliefs is as a party, which here lately we're not real sure really what that is. But yeah.
Well, it sounds like COVID's just dominating. I mean, if you're in government right now and you're talking about laws and legislation, that every conversation includes COVID probably. But I want to ask you about like after COVID.
Okay.
And okay, so I mean, eventually it will end. We might have another pandemic. It might be the first of others, but suppose we do get back to kind of normal and the economy kind of recovers a little bit, and hopefully, and kids are back in school. What are your goals for public education in North Carolina? I mean, my mother was an education report. She covered education as a journalist for 30 years. So all my life I've talked about it. And then I was a teacher. And now I hardly ever think about it. But I hear stuff that's not so good about since the last 8 years, the schools have taken a hit. So what do you see?
So I'm always hopeful because I've been honored and blessed to work with some of the most amazing educators and people who truly do it for the love of the profession, which is why they continue to stay in a field that does not respect or value them. I have often gone on record as saying is that the pandemic has really pushed to the forefront what we've known for years. I've been in education for over 25 years, and we were talking about reforming schools when I first became an educator. But I would say we don't need to reform education. We actually need to create a new model for education. And as you know, this model is outdated, it's antiquated, it was never designed to educate women and students of color. It was designed around educating elite white males, and it still plays out today. It is structured based on the fact that it was preparing students to go work in factories and to participate in the industrialization age. And that is no longer an industry that we should be preparing children for. So I think that is a wonderful opportunity for us to begin to get a plethora of stakeholders around the table and talk about what do we want education to look like. And I am not saying that there is not a place for brick and mortar education. Not saying that because obviously some students need that, but it needs to look very differently about how we approach it. And then there are not all of the children are suffering in this remote setting, and some of them have enjoyed the flexibility and being able to control their learning. So we need to create space for that as well. So I say that as educators, we often allow educational issues to happen to us. And by that, I mean, we don't necessarily pick up the gauntlet and move forward with the charge on what we want it to look like and the change we want to see. Rather, we spend a lot of times kind of coming in after decisions have been made and then trying to convince people why we think the way we do things is the right way. So I don't have the answers, but I know that if you talk to young people, from the way that our buildings are laid out, they still feel very institutionalized. That's what my students told me, to the types of desks and chairs that we use. And so we really need to just think about modernizing our schools and bringing them into the 21st century. And we don't. I mean, your great grandmother could walk into a classroom and it wouldn't look a whole lot different than when she was in school. And that's really saying something for us.
Mm. Yeah, it's almost like, and I want to ask you a question about like equity, but I mean, it's almost like what their educators know a little bit about how kids learn,
Mhm.
right? And then there are legislators who really don't have a deep understanding of
Correct.
that.
Yeah.
And so, but the educators don't have much say, do they? I mean, the
So
legislators,
I was sitting today and I was thinking, they were doing a presentation on appropriations for education and they were talking about class size allotments. And I was thinking, how many of them would make it a day in a kindergarten class with 18 students and no full-time teaching assistant? Let's do that. And then they will start to have a different appreciation for what we do. And so teachers have a lot of ideas about what education can look like. And you know, part of the conversation is around private schools reopening and charter schools reopening. But the way in which those schools are funded is totally different. And that they have huge coffers of money available to them to kind of morph their education. So they have morphed because they've been funded in a way that allows them to pivot as changes occur that we don't always have an opportunity to do in mass in public school settings. And some of your most phenomenal instructors find ways to kind of morph and pivot their teaching based on the needs of not only what the students need, but what they're preparing their students to do. And I think that we need to try to do that in a more systematized way.
I've never
And
been a big,
yeah, it's going to be hard.
I've never been a big fan of charter schools because it takes money away from, or private schools, really. Not, I don't see, I went to a private college, but they just takes money away from
Well,
public schools.
well, in full disclosure, I ran a charter school in Minnesota for 3 years. And the reason that I support charter schools and I don't support vouchers is charter schools are deregulated and it allows them the flexibility. And we have to take every child that shows up through the door. So we can't have gatekeeping mechanisms where we're going to take, certain children and not take others. But I do think that we need to adopt charter-like flexibilities for schools.
Mm.
There is no longer, so what's kind of been mulling over in my head is it's no longer one size fits all. And we used to see that label all the time, for flea-flowing stuff. It's one size fits all. And that's kind of how we've approached education. But now you'll see the tag that says one size fits most. Recognizing that there are going to be people that are sizes either too big or too small that won't fit in this kind of free-flowing garment. And I think we need to think of education in the same way. And we should untie the hands of people to be able to develop calendars based on what are the needs of the students that they're servicing. And to change our instructional day again. Our instructional day is really based on childcare. But we don't like to talk about that either, right? Hence the reason that people are really biting at the chomp to start schools back for childcare versus saying to our industry, you need to put childcare centers in your business. You need to figure out how to offer that as a service to your employees. So that would be my hope and goal for the future is that we begin to look at a one size fits most. And untying hands and allowing people to have calendar flexibility because what they need on the coast is not the same needs that they have in the mountains. That's not, the same needs for us that live in the central area of the state. Tourism is not as a big of a driver for us as it is for our coastal and our mountainous parts of the state.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you one more question here.
Sure.
But it's really my pet peeve. It's kind of a complaint of mine, but I'm going to try to make it sound like a question. Okay. So, my daughter was, I've got 3 children. One of them, when she was in the first grade, she had like 18 kids in the class with a full-time assistant. And then the schools merged, the city and the county. And the next thing you know, my son has 30 kids in the class with no assistant. Different education. That's a learning disability in itself right there.
Absolutely.
So, and now I've got a grandson who's 2.5, and my daughter and her partner, they're looking at buying a house. And we live here in Salisbury, and the school close to the school I went to, and I still live close to it. I hadn't gone anywhere in my whole life, but this school has got a rating of like 1, or 1.5 or low. And then, so I want my grandson to get a good education. So they're thinking, well, if they move to Lake Norman, they can't afford to live on Lake Norman. Okay. They don't make that much money, but if they lived over there, they could get a much better school. And so they're just like searching, and why we have these property taxes determining the kind of education a child gets. It's just unfair. And I don't know if that's a question, but
well, what I would challenge you to do is to rethink the ratings, right? And the reason I'm saying that is that Kimberly Park, for much of the time that I was there, was a D or F school. But we met or exceeded growth every year. And we doubled enrollment. And
Wait, can you say what D-O?
A D or F school as rated by the state. They rate us, right?
Got it. Okay.
We became a triage center. At one point, we were 70% male. We were 100% free and reduced. 100% of our children were children of color. And so what happened is parents started to bring their children to our school because they were hearing about all the wonderful things that we were doing for the students. But the downside was that was almost every one of those children who came to us, some of them coming from the good schools, right, were, sometimes 2, maybe 3 years behind. So the grade didn't reflect the work. And what I say to parents, and I'll say this to you and you say this to your daughter, don't arbitrarily look at a score. You need to know what is it that your child needs, right? Because on paper, we were considered a persistently low performing school. But for our parents, it's what our children needed. And now our kids, when they leave, they go to middle school and they're flourishing, and now they're going to high school, and we're talking to them about college. And many of them, the first time, are thinking that college is possible. So don't look at the arbitrary ratings, because those schools in Lake Norman may not be the best environment for your child, for your grandchild. That school that's closest to your home, where you have teachers in there that have relationships with the families, and they may be dealing with a plethora of issues that they don't have to deal with in Lake Norman, but they're still giving those kids what they need, not only educationally, but socially and emotionally. And one of the things that I would love for us to do is to get away from ranking schools, because it doesn't tell the whole story of what's happening in those buildings. And I know firsthand. And we would have people come in and they would be honest and say, we didn't expect this school to be so wonderful. Our kids had an outdoor water garden and gardens and amphitheater, and they had all of these wonderful experiences that children have at your day schools. And if we had been situated in another part of the city, we would have been considered a quaint little day school. So that's what I would say to you, is to not let an arbitrary ranking determine whether a school is best for your grandbaby. Go into the schools, because culture is tangible. You know this, and climate is tangible. And so what is it that you feel when you walk in that building? Do you feel loved? Do you feel like the children are special? Do you, is it cold? So that's my pet peeve.
I,
you know.
I got it, because there can be my cousin. I've got a cousin who's one of the most dedicated teachers I've ever known. I mean, she's the hardest working person. She always made me feel lazy. She works so hard, and she teaches at that school. And and so you can have great teachers at a D or F rated school, and you could have a toxic teacher in an A school too, right?
That's right.
So it comes down to who you're with all day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
okay, now I know. Now I've got something to go talk to my daughter and son-in-law about.
Yeah. And here's the thing, how will schools ever get better if those of us who can do better does not hold schools accountable for doing better, right? So we're in this together, and we have to advocate for all of our babies, right? And for me, it doesn't matter what socioeconomic background they come from, or what color, or any of that. Like, they know over the years, all of my kids know that I care, not for the words that I use, but the fact that I came prepared every day. I was concerned about what was going on in their lives. I held them accountable. I gave them hope. And I think when you talk to any great teacher, and I'm always a teacher first, you're going to hear some of those same things, is that it's about giving children who were once hopeless this sense of hope that life can be better for them.
Okay. So, Dr. Baker, we're going to wrap it up here. Is there anything else? I really appreciate you talking about education. And that's not what I invited you to talk about. But one of these days, COVID will be over, and some of these ideas of yours might actually have a chance to be heard.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I would just say to all of your listeners is take the chance to do what you did. Get to know the candidate, not from these canned speeches and all the things that politicians say and do, but Google them, see what other people say about them, see if it's somebody that you want to follow, and and do that, hold them accountable. And then when it comes time to vote, get behind them, support them, but hold them accountable, because we're accountable to all of the residents of the state.
Well, thank you so much for the generosity of your time and care today. I know you're a very busy person. We really appreciate you being here and honoring our little podcast here with this conversation.
Nothing, no beginning is too small. And so I was honored at the request, and feel free to reach out at any time if there's anything I can do to be of service, either on this issue or around education or any other thing that you might want to know my thoughts on. Please feel free to reach out.
Well, thank you. We will. Our guest today has been Dr. Amber Baker, a member of the House of Representatives in the North Carolina legislature. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for being here. We are honored that you listen. Be sure to visit phenomwellcbd.com for quality CBD and Delta 8 THC products. You can use the code CHILL for a 15% discount online. And you can even visit our store if you're in Salisbury, or have free delivery in Rowan County, free shipping anywhere. Phenomwell is produced by Mo Barrow and is part of the Press Play Podcast Network, which empowers hosts to create high-quality podcasts that inspire and entertain. For more information, email content@pressplaypodcast.com.